Hi, and welcome to this algebra video. The goal of this video is to classify different types of compound inequalities. When we talk about compound inequalities, we're talking about inequalities that have more than one part. So this is going to be something new that you haven't seen before. In this video, I'm going to make a flowchart that describes and kind of outlines the different types of compound inequalities. So you'll want to get a clean page in your notebook and write this down. The two types of compound inequalities we have are intersection inequalities, and the word "and" is going to be the identifier for these. And the other kinds of inequalities we're going to look at are union inequalities, and the word "or" is going to be the identifier for these. So for each type of inequality, we're going to look at how these are displayed analytically. We're going to look at what words can describe these, and we're going to also look at graphs and some possible solutions. So let's think about, for example, our school day. And let's say the school day goes from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Okay, for the intersection inequality, we're going to represent that as the time that we're in school. So when we are in school is represented that X is between 8 o'clock. It's bigger than 8 o'clock, but less than 3 o'clock if we're looking at the time in which we're at school. So for this problem, you can see that there are three different pieces. X can be greater than 8, or it can be less than 3, but it has to be in between these two numbers. If we're looking at the words that describe this inequality, we would say that X is greater than or equal to 8, and X is less than or equal to 3. So you can see how in this problem we have one inequality on the left if we ignore the 3, or if we keep that, we have another inequality here. So this is actually made up of two separate inequalities, and I'm going to write those down below right here. One of them is there, and the other is there. And we put them both together, we get the inequality that we have expressed right here as the intersection. Now, the graph of this is going to be somewhat intuitive because it makes sense. So the graph, if we're making a number line of time, we have our 8 o'clock a.m. We're going to put our 12 noon here. And we could call 3 would be 13, 14, 15 o'clock if we were using military time. So our graph of this would be, we start at 8, we end at 3, and we're in school during this entire time. So our X values fall in this interval. Okay, so this is our graphical representation of our compound inequality. Now, what are some possible solutions? So possible solutions or values for X. X could equal 8 a.m. because we can equal 8. We could equal 3 p.m. We could be at 12 noon. We could be 11:55. We could be at 1:22 and so forth. So you could list a lot of possible solutions. The union inequalities are a little bit different. So now for the union, we're going to look at when we're not in school. So if we want to represent when we're not in school, then let's use A for our variable. We would say A is less than 8 o'clock or earlier than 8 o'clock, or A could be bigger than 3 or after 3 o'clock. So this would be our numerical representation for when we're not in school. If we want to write this in words, we would say A is less than 8 or A is greater than 3. The way we would represent this graphically is going to be kind of interesting, something that you haven't seen before. We're going to do the number line the same way. 8 o'clock comes before 3 p.m., which is the same as 15 if you're looking at military time. We're going to use open dots, and if you look at our inequalities here, A is less than 8, which means we're to the left of 8, or A is greater than 3, which is here. So if you look at this graph, we have two different places that are solutions, which makes sense if you're tying it back to when we're not in school. We're not in school before school starts, and we're not in school after school ends. So, possible solutions here would be 3 o'clock a.m., 7:55 a.m., 3:01 p.m., etc. You can think of a lot more. So this is your introduction into compound inequalities. We're going to do a few example problems and videos to come. Make sure you have this flow chart written down. And the most important thing to know about these is you're going to have two different kinds. You're going to identify the intersection problems by looking for the word and. Those can be written using one 3-part inequality. Your graph is always going to be one solution set where you're shading in between two dots. And for the or inequalities, you're going to have the word or. You're going to have two separate inequality pieces, and you're going to have two separate places that have been shaded. So you have two different spots for your solution sets. I hope this makes sense. Make sure to ask questions in class if you need help.